A2IM, the collective voice of independent music.
Thank you for joining us. This is the You're Losing Money, Why Bad Metadata is to Blame panel. Thankful to have my guests here, Bill, Robert, and Ali. And I'm going to allow each of them to do a quick introduction before we dive right into the topic. So I'm going to start with Ali.
Sure. Thanks, Dae. So my name is Ali Lieberman. I'm the Director of Business Process and Product Management at SoundExchange. So I lead a team that documents, analyzes, optimizes all of the workflows at SoundExchange. And I also lead product management efforts for a lot of our new products and services like Music Data Exchange.
Thank you very much, Ali. I'm going to pass it on over to Bill.
Cool. Hey, I am Bill Wilson. I am the SVP of Operations and Innovation for Entertainment One Music. I am responsible for the systems and processes about how our content gets delivered to the market. I'm also responsible for building the internal metric systems that we use for financial analysis as well as building a data lake for programmatic advertising.
Thank you, Bill. Last and certainly not least, Rob, please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Rob Weitzner. I look after the North American business for the State 51 Music Group. Relevant to this discussion, one of our businesses under that umbrella is Consolidated Independent, CI. We've been in the supply chain, digital supply chain business for the last 17, 18 years, looking after the delivery of assets and metadata from from all of our content clients to the digital marketplace.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So we pretty much have a wide span of experts here to talk about metadata and how ultimately it impacts your royalties. Before we dive into it, I just want to start with a kind of laying the playing field, if you will, talking about the types of metadata that everyone should know about at this point. But there may be startup labels that are really starting to grow and may be familiar with maybe a minimum amount of metadata. So I want to kind of give a crash course on metadata from each of your perspectives in terms of the metadata that directly impacts your day-to-day business. I'm going to start with Bill, just to talk about what are some categories of metadata that your clients and your organization are dealing with.
The topmost layer for us is commercial metadata. Obviously, what you send out through the DDEX feed. It's the way that products are posted to all of the different services. The accuracy of that depends on how they're displayed. You have contextual metadata, which is some of the things that are available in the DDEX AMID standard. For example, musicians who played on the record, the biographies of the artist, other sort of contextual assets and bits of information that all go into telling the artist's story, enabling them to be discovered, and enabling them to be paid.
Okay, thank you. Ali or Rob, did you want to add to that?
I'll jump in. So, it's an alphabet soup, as we know. Bill just mentioned DDEX, DDEX, Digital Data Exchange. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's a standard that's been evolving for since 2005, 2006. And it's a way for some semblance of standardization around the infrastructure for delivery of both the commercial elements that Bill talked to and the contextual elements. Some of the additional alphabet soup pieces are things like the ISRC, the global perpetual identifier for every individual track within a product, the UPC, ISNI, a number of other alphabet soups that we can talk about that are all related to identifying a piece of music in the global ecosystem.
So if I'm a label and I've started to play around with this alphabet soup, I'm starting to create ISRC codes and embedding it into my files. What does this mean for me from a royalty standpoint at SoundExchange? Do I have to deliver this data to you? Do you supposed to know it exists in the world? How do I get my money out of SoundExchange?
It's really important to be proactive with your metadata. I can't stress that enough. So every time you're releasing new music, and so it's important to get that information to collective management organizations like SoundExchange. So DDEX is one way to do that, which we mentioned, Digital Data Exchange, which is really just, a messaging standard to communicate all of this metadata, usually for high volume clients. At SoundExchange, we're dealing with majors, but we're also dealing with independent labels, singer-songwriters. So collecting all of this information takes a lot of different forms. So in addition to DDEX, there's also a way to go into portals and key in this information. So different channels you can use at SoundExchange through portal or through DDEX. But yeah, again, it's just very important to be proactive, provide as much information as you can. It can be a pain in the ass because we ask for a lot of information, but at the end of the day, it's really just to benefit you and to make sure that you're getting royalties as quickly as possible.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm going to throw this back. Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Okay, as far as core metadata, when people think about commercial metadata, it's stuff that you see on the DSP. So to kind of really underscore it, it's the release name, the release language, the artist that appears, the territory that it's from, the original street date versus the actual street date if it's a reissue, for example. Then it dives into commercial things like pre-orders, dates, and album pricing, and even what the C and P line should be when it's displayed on the DSP. So these are the kinds of things that before anybody releases a record or a track to the DSPs, all of this fundamentally basic commercial information that has to be sent, upstream into your distributor really needs to be organized in some way prior to even something being made available. And then you can talk about UPC and ISRC and the track names and some of the other pieces of information that are required by a distributor in order to release a product. So that's the core sort of commercial metadata that's necessary when I say DDEX.
At least how we look at it at SoundExchange and other societies and collective management organizations. This commercial data that Bill was talking about, we look at that as some unchanging facts about the recording, and that is, ISRC's track title, artist name, and what have you. There's also what we see as the the changing facts about the recording, which is who owns the rights, for a given territory, for a certain time period, for a certain right type, like streaming versus digital download. So, while that's the sort of basic core metadata like artist, track name, and all of that's important, it's also equally important to know I own the right to this recording if it's used in this context, in this territory during this time period. So making sure that both of those data fields are being captured is really important, and that you have control over that as a rights owner.
We set a good base layer in terms of talking about the different types of metadata and the importance of it. But let's talk about what happens when I don't deliver the metadata correctly. How does this actually impact my bottom line? I'm going to start with Rob. So I'm sending my releases to CI, and you're getting it out into the world for me. And then later down the road, I'm not getting checks from whatever source, and I come back to you and say, hey, I sent you my release, what's happening?
Hopefully we've stopped that problem at the start. So what we've done, what we try to do is QC the data coming in, quality control and quality check. There are a number of DSPs that have very extensive style guides, how metadata needs to be presented, and we've built a system that verifies the data that's coming into our platform against those style guides to make sure there are no glaring red flags. And so that all of these fundamental core pieces of data that Bill and Ali and I have already talked about are there, and they're represented in the correct form. And once that's verified, then we ingest that data into our system and send it out to whatever DSP it may go to, whether that's SoundExchange, we have a feed to SoundExchange, or whether that's to Apple Music and whatever territories within Apple Music that piece of content is licensed to by that particular content provider. So we hope to stop that problem at the beginning by checking the data against the known standards in the market so that the data is complete in terms of what is needed for commercial delivery.
Right. You don't want to upload your music and just have it go direct to the market, because ultimately that will result in, a few things. One, it will be just rejected by the DSP, so there's the potential in missing your street date and marketing opportunities. And the other thing is that you'll hurt discovery of the artist as well. So there are a lot of risks. If the data is wrong, or there's conflicting ISRCs, or the territory rights are wrong, you could run into conflicts with other distributors who may have, one distributor may have rights for the US, somebody else may have rest of the world. If somebody accidentally clicks whole world for that other distributor, you could have a takedown of your content in a specific territory that happens after the fact. And some of these things are able to be checked with pre-flight checks. We use a system called OpenPlay that also has a lot of built-in pre-flight checks. So when a user uploads, it kind of idiot-proofs things against the style guide, because most metadata problems are user error. It's also based on duplicative. You can't have the same ISRC attached to a number of different songs. Sometimes people accidentally duplicate ISRCs, or God forbid, even put the UPC for a digital and conflate that with the physical UPC, so that's the same one. So there's a lot of different ways that there could be errors in reporting and errors that prevent monetization from occurring. And least of which is not providing at least one songwriter name in the publishing data, because what that doesn't do is it doesn't allow for streaming companies or the companies that handle publishing songwriting royalties for the streaming companies to triangulate who the songwriter is on a specific release. For example, you have a song called Hello. Is that a cover of the song made famous by Adele? Is that the Eminem song Hello? Or is that one of 538 other songs called Hello in the BMI database?
One other thing I'd like to add onto that is, you also run the risk of with noisy or bad data not ever making it to the market, or not being available in the stores. So even if you get through a pre-flight check, as Bill calls it, once you land at the DSP destination, depending on the noise in your data, if it's not QC'd prior, it may never, the DSP itself may reject that and never put it on their system. And so there's no opportunity to be monetized, let alone having the wrong track monetized.
I actually want to talk about international. Let's say I'm a label, I'm really trying to focus on not only building my market here in the US, but we see there's some uptick somewhere overseas. What are the international considerations when dealing with metadata, especially in territories where English is not the primary language?
With respect to, obviously, domestic translation of key titles into different character sets like Cyrillic, or I forget whether it's hiragana or katakana for Japan, or into Mandarin, for example, characters, or Hindi. These are the kinds of things that matter if you're going into other territories that you want to be able to create, as a, as some people put it, glocal. You want to make all content local, right? It's global, but it's also local. You want to try to have things that are popping in other markets be translated. And you also, in certain countries where there are cultural sensitivities, you need to make sure that explicit tag and your cover art meets local standards.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming there's guides for this as well.
There are guides, but there's also just kind of generic flags, and the takedown hammer is used rather significantly sometimes.
Got it. Ali, I'm going to throw this over at you. Can you talk a little bit about an example or use cases when royalties are locked up as a result of the information that has been provided to SoundExchange?
Yeah, there's a few things. One is, we do this pre-flight check, as we've been calling it, to validate the data as it comes in. But sometimes, when usage gets reported from services, it doesn't perfectly match up with all the data that labels provide to us. So when that happens, there's a lot of matching that goes on. At the end of the day, if a match can't be made, one thing we do, which a lot of other companies do, is we push out this data to a portal and say, here's unclaimed recordings or unclaimed works. Please review them and make claims. Give us your data. Tell us that this is yours. So the transparency of it is really important in order to make sure that royalties aren't being held. Another issue that comes up a lot is just conflicting data or conflicting claims. The release label that appears on a recording, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the label that owns the rights today. So a lot of times, we'll see metadata come in from two different sources, two different rights owners. And it appears that they're both claiming the same recording in the same territory for the same time period. So in those cases, there's a lot of outreach we need to do to make sure, did you really mean to claim this? Please provide more context. And again, these are things that get surfaced on a portal for transparency so that folks can self-manage as much as they can to clear any hurdles and to make sure that royalties start flowing when there's those conflicts.
As an indie label, they should have learned by now in this conversation that you have standards such as DDEX in terms of preparing metadata for their remittance to a third party. We have contextual metadata, release level metadata, commercial metadata. But let's talk about some best practices in terms of getting the data right in the first place. Rob, you have systems in place to check and kind of qualify the data upon receipt, but how can a label better prepare their metadata even before it gets to CI or even before it gets to Entertainment One?
Well, I have a story of a friend's label who ran a punk rock label for many years. It's not me, because I have always paid pathological attention to my data. Which is probably why I have the job I have now. But while, he didn't keep a spreadsheet of his data, he always let all the data reside at his distributor, which means that he was tied to that distributor like a roach motel because he was not able to extract his own data nor his own masters. When everything is done in portal at your distributor, being able to get that out, extricating your information is usually very difficult. So when trying to change distributors, this individual had to rebuild their entire catalog, which included ripping several hundred CDs at high res, as well as starting from ground zero with a spreadsheet to re-upload their entire catalog, including reacquiring, including trying to look up ISRCs that already existed and UPCs that already existed. So the easiest way for labels to do this is pay attention. There are distributors that you can get metadata upload spreadsheets from. Even some of the ones that are kind of a la carte. The individual upload kind of, and they give you certain fields. Collect those fields on a Google Sheet for your releases, right? Make sure that you have a Dropbox with all your high-res WAV files in it that you can always pay attention to and have on hand. So when you do want to leave your distributor, you don't experience the roaches get in, but roaches can't get out mentality that a lot of distributors have.
Speaking of distributors, Rob, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So we've never taken the view that the data that's ingested into the platform is ours. It's available at all times to the client. And what's important there is what Bill talked about. Making changes on the fly and not having a backup of the base of those can lead to some significant problems. If there's no provenance of changes that's very clear, you won't be able to determine where a metadata mistake occurred. So from our perspective, in best practices, when you're reviewing your options in the market, always look for the companies that allow you to maintain and retain control over the data that you are creating and getting out into the market. Remember, you're the owner of your data, and it's incredibly important for you to take that responsibility seriously. From a best practices perspective, I think for what Bill's really speaking about, have a backup. Always have a backup and have it be full. The other piece of that is, remember, metadata is really data about data, and part of the data here is all of the assets that are part of a music file. So the music, the art, and the information. Have everything in as high quality resolution as you can. Make sure that your artwork is in high quality resolution. Make sure that your audio files are in the highest quality resolution that you can have. And that is a way to ensure that you're future-proofing your business against what changes may occur in the marketplace.
Yeah, for example, artwork has changed from being a very small file to being a very large file. You know, I believe some companies are taking 8,000 pixels by 8,000 pixel size now because, you know, music is being deployed to screens of all sizes with very high resolution.
Great for startup labels or even existing labels. They need to kind of rethink their metadata strategy and ensure that they are capturing and preparing and delivering the works the right way. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.